is under, the first one is under 1 year of tenancy. So under 1 year of tenancy just means they have resided at the property for less than 1 year. They could be in a fixed term lease, or they could be in a month-to-month lease or a week-to-week lease. It doesn't really matter if they've been there under 1 year. They are considered under 1 year tenancy. Then we'll move on to month-to-month. So a month-to-month tenancy just means that there is no end date. So either it can be a month-to-month. Let's say somebody wanted to rent month-to-month. They want to rent for several months. So they've got a month-to-month tenancy. Or you have a fixed term lease that the 1 year is up and it has rolled over to month-to-month tenancy. So you've got a month-to-month tenancy that could possibly be under 1 year, a short-term tenancy, or you could have a month-to-month tenancy that is over 1 year. So you could have a month-to-month tenancy that's in an over a year occupancy of the property. So there's more regulations on how you would have to notice that person, even though they're in a month-to-month tenancy. Hopefully that makes sense. If you want to go to the next slide here, Kevin. Okay, so a fixed term lease. So there's a start date and an end date. This type of lease, again, could be under 1 year or over a year. As a fixed term lease, if you are under the 1 year and you no longer want to rent the property, you are allowed to give a 30-day notice prior to the 1 year of the lease expiring. Or you can sign a new lease with the tenant, or it can roll into month-to-month. Once any of those options have been chosen and the lease has rolled over more than a year, then you have the regulations, same as anyone in any kind of lease, for the regulations of over a year of tenancy. Okay, so the important part about the fixed term lease is that there is an end date. And when you are listing a property with a fixed term lease, the lease upholds. So that end date will uphold over everything else. So your tenant is going to stay with that property if it's a lease date that's 6 months out, 3 months out, whatever the case is. Maybe it's a brand new year lease that was just signed. Or, you can negotiate to cash for keys or things like that, which we'll get into. But the important thing about the fixed term lease is you cannot give a 90-day notice, even with a qualifying reason, if that end date, if it's before the end date. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to cover ORS 90.427, and it's terminating a tenancy without cause. So 30-day notice. The only way that you can terminate a tenancy with 30-day notice is under a 1 year. So you can give a 30-day notice to anyone on month-to-month under 1 year. Or you can give a 30-day notice to someone on a fixed term lease, and it will be expiring within that first year. You can give them a 30-day notice prior to the lease end date, but only during that first year. If that tenant continues to stay for 2 and 3 years, you would have to give a 90-day notice. Okay, so anything over a year. So the only way to give the 30-day notice is anything under a year. A 90-day notice is for everyone over 1 year, and that is for qualifying. Shoot, did you lose that?
We lost you for
Are
a
you there?
second. Yeah. And
Okay,
I tried to say
sorry.
something
Okay,
and
so
then
90
I
days.
hit the wrong button and then it can, so we're back to where you were.
No worries. So a 90-day notice is typically the notices that we deal with in my office. And this is the important notice. Most likely, you're going to be dealing with a tenancy over a year, and you're going to have to be creative and figure out that marketing for that property. So this 90-day notice is really important to understand and to use correctly. When you're giving a 90-day notice, we use this form here. It's Form 5A from Oregon Rental Housing, and it's called a Notice of Termination. And on that notice, it lists the qualifying reasons, and you check which one of the reasons that you're using for that particular property. Let's see. Okay, so the qualifying reasons for 90-day notices. So demo or convert, if you're going to take down the property, or it's a 8-plex rental property and you're going to turn it into a motel now, or convert it into a different type living situation, which is kind of happening now. So that's a good one to use. People are redeveloping properties, redeveloping land, putting in multi-units. So that would be a great qualifying reason if you're doing one of those projects. Renovations. So you can give a 90-day notice to do extensive renovations. There is no black and white about what type of renovations. It's kind of a little bit gray. The wording is here. I'll read it just exactly what it says here. The landlord intends to undertake repairs or renovations to the unit within a reasonable time, and the unit is unsafe or unfit for occupancy, or will be unsafe or unfit for occupancy. So this is the one that we use mostly all the time with our 90-day notices. This is also the one that I was going to discuss about getting ready to sell. Let's say you want to clean up the house, make it look the best, spruce it up. Well, you could do a 90-day notice on somebody who is in a month-to-month tenancy because of fixed-term lease, or you could give a 90-day notice to somebody on a fixed-term lease, but at their expiration date. You could give 90 days prior to their expiration date. But you could give a 90-day notice for it, go in, paint the house, do all the things you need to do to make it show well and be at its best to be listing it, and then go ahead and list it. So then you're without a tenant. So that is a good option. If you don't want to deal with having the tenant, is using the 90-day notice prior to listing the home. It's not a problem to do these after. Let's say you're the new owner, gaining the tenant and doing things like that. That's not a problem either to do the 90-day notice. But if you just want to completely skip, I don't want to deal with the tenants, I don't want to deal with anything going wrong, there are options to get the unit vacated so that you could list it without a tenant, which would obviously bring you a lot bigger pool of buyers. You're not just getting investors or somebody that has to move into it within 30 days or whatever the 1031 exchange requirements are for occupying the unit, because that can be a big one. If you're giving a 90-day notice to someone and your 1031 says that you have to have the unit within 60 days or whatnot, and you're not going to have it, there's issues like that with timing on the 90-day notice with some kind of lendings and situations like that. So the renovations. So again, we do that a lot in our office here. When I do a business plan for somebody on a live property, and just kind of line out what we're going to do when we gain that property, it usually needs to be a bigger renovation. Like I said, it needs to be unfit or unsafe to live in, but it's a great one to use. Okay, so obviously family member moving in is another qualifying reason. And then the new owner intends to occupy the unit. Okay, so that is the 90-day notice. Those are the qualifying reasons, and that is kind of the new law now. It's not 30 days, it's 90 days, and you cannot do it without cause. You have to do it with one of the qualifying reasons. Or you could do an eviction for cause. Okay, so written agreement. So you could also, which we've done and been successful at, is approach the tenant, come up with something that works for both the buyer and the tenant, come up with a vacate date, any date, whatever it is, come up with an agreement that they're going to vacate earlier than the requirements or anything like that. I mean, we've done it without any cash or keys or anything. We've just negotiated an agreement in writing. This is the date they're going to leave. So a lot of times if you're good at that, you might be able to do that and get them out even on closing or whatnot. Just it is possible to approach them and do a personal agreement with all of the right topics in the agreement, obviously, like the date that they are vacating. You know, you probably want to include in there that they need to abide by all of the lease move out requirements and things like that. But as long as it's a written agreement agreed on by both parties. Cash for keys. So this is a great option. If somebody needs to get in the home earlier than 90 days and, you know, they have a family, they're moving out of their other house, you could do cash for keys. So again, it's just a written agreement that both parties agree on. So, you know, you could offer them 10 grand to leave in 30 days instead of 90. You know, whatever the number is, or whatever the date is that your new buyer really needs to occupy the unit, come up with some kind of agreed upon agreement there. Relocation fees. So this is part of the SB 608, the rent control. And if you are selling a property, doing the 90-day notice qualifying reason, and you are a investor property owner that owns 4 or more properties, you are required to pay the tenant 1 month fee of rent for relocating fees. Okay, delivery of notice. So this is really important. Things can go sideways really quickly, and not only go sideways, but you could delay yourself lots and lots of months. If you do not notice correctly or deliver it correctly, you are going to have to start over with the entire 90-day notice process. You know, sometimes you notice or do it incorrectly and the tenant may not notice, you know, and you get through. But if there is a tenant that noticed that you have done something incorrectly on the noticing or delivery of the notice, they can absolutely stop that notice time clock, and everything would have to be restarted by the person delivering the notice. So if you want to click one more time there we go. There's been lots of questions about how to deliver the notice or what's proper. Again, on Form 5A, it's very clear on how to deliver the notice, and you can check one. So you can serve it personally. You can serve it first class mail. And if you serve it by mail, you have to do the expiration date of the vacate 3 days more than the date that you're sending it out, just to account for mailing time. And then everyone kind of asks about email. You know, is email sufficient? It is sufficient if it has all of the information that it needs, but it has to go with one of the other ways as well, only on a termination of tenancy. So it's a little bit different if somebody is just getting a notice from us that we're going to be there in 24 hours tomorrow to work on maintenance, or some kind of other notice that we give tenants. We don't have to deliver it by mail. But when you're giving a notice of when the tenancy is going to terminate, it has to be done by mail, in person, posted on the door and mail. So that is one option, posted on the door and mail, and then email along with any of all those others. So you could email the notice and then send one in the mail. And the only reason the email is great is just because you can let them know right away. We don't have to wait for the mail, even though the date is 3 days later or whatnot. You're giving your tenants a little bit more time. And a lot of times I've already talked with my tenants, maybe even a month before we've given the notice. We're pretty transparent at our company, and we've talked to them, kind of let them know what's coming down the pipeline. And so an email is just letting them know ahead of time, because you don't know what's going to happen with that 90-day notice. If you're serving a 90-day notice, that means you are usually on a month-to-month agreement. So a lot of people are like, oh my God, we tell them ahead of time, or if we give them any idea, then they might move out or this and that. But in this case, great. So they get the notice and they find a rental before 90 days, great. They're going to vacate, give us a 30-day notice, because that's the tenant's requirement, is just a 30-day notice. So I wouldn't worry about, giving them a heads up, or if they're getting squirrely to move, that's great. That's a great compromise for everyone. If you are wanting to keep the tenant and you did this and they got squirrely, let's say it's a great tenant, it's a great price, it makes the property have a good return. Somebody could be moving out, and that could potentially scare the investor if there's not a lease signed on it. But again, he can relist it at market rate, so it shouldn't be an issue. It should be a win-win for everyone if somebody's vacating after the notice, earlier than the notice.
Michelle, we had a couple questions in the queue. The first is, do relocation fees apply in Deschutes County?
Yes, they do.
They do.
They're in all of Oregon. It's part of SB 608.
Okay. And then the other question was, are relocation fees payable when the current landlord has 4 or more properties, or if the buyer has 4 or more properties?
It is the seller.
It's only the seller?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's a little bit gray too. We've gone through this because it's like, does your owner have 4 in Deschutes County? Do they have 4 in Portland? Do they have 4 in California? There's lots of different things that tenants might come up with or whatnot, but it is kind of gray. There is no black and white on it. I kind of go by what's on Dial. And so it's Deschutes County if my properties are in Deschutes County. But there might be some other people that have had some things happen with them or experiences. Oh, I can't hear you, Kevin.
Oh, that was all the questions. Sorry.
Oh,
yep.
Okay, tenant notices. So again, we'll just keep going on with this here. Let me get my screen back on. Okay. Okay, so when you are having to do a 90-day notice, because one of the qualifying reasons, so the seller has to give the notice to the tenant. They have to, obviously you have to kind of talk with the buyer too and see what they want to do for the 90-day notice, but it's delivered from the seller. So if there's an owner moving in, obviously, you check the box that owner's moving in or whatnot. Also, if you want to click the next two buttons, Kevin.
Yeah, before we advance, a couple more questions just popped in. One is, does the count for 4 or more properties include rentals only or include your primary residence as well?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I haven't dug into that, so I just don't want to comment on it. But in my opinion, it would just be 4 or more properties. I mean, that's the kind of way that I perceive text. But
And then the other question is, does the 90-day notice start once a seller has an accepted offer from a buyer?
we'll get into that next.
Okay. And then another one said, so if an owner's property management company delivers the notice, does that count, or has it to be directly from the seller?
No, the landlord manager can deliver the notice.
Okay. All right, we're good. I'll advance just a second. Let me get those cleared out. There we go.
Okay, so if you are having to do a notice to the tenant for them to vacate the unit, then we're either giving a 90-day notice with a qualifying reason. We're giving a 30-day notice because they are under 1 year of tenancy. And in my opinion, if you're doing a 30-day notice, you probably should just go ahead and vacate that tenant before you're listing, because then you're missing out on a pool of buyers that don't want to deal with a tenant being inherited with the property. So if you can do a 30-day notice to somebody, you might think about maybe giving that and then listing the property. Okay, so you're either giving a 90-day notice, a 30-day notice, or you're coming up with a written agreement approved by both parties. The other part of the 90-day notice when you're selling the property is the seller has to give the tenant a notice of an accepted offer. And so typically people send the offer and then they black out any of the pertinent information that might be privacy related. And so they have to give notice of an accepted offer. And that's an important part, because that goes along with the 90-day notice or whatever type of notice that you're sending. So there are definitely 2 parts to giving notice to the tenant. You're going to be giving your 90-day notice, your qualifying reason, 30-day notice, and then a notice of accepted offer. And that notice of an accepted offer has to be within 120 days. But if you're already giving a 90-day notice, you're usually giving it to them with that notice. Okay, so now if you're the new owner, inheriting the new tenants, and you have a plan for the unit, let's say you're converting them, you're wanting to get them back up to market rate, we're very creative and innovative at our office. So I mean, a lot of times we want to keep the tenant, it's already at a great rate, or if we have plans for the unit, we're going to be noticing the tenants there. Obviously, it's kind of a sensitive situation to be noticing tenants, and especially in this market, it's not a fun thing. It doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy, but a lot of times it's what it's in the client's business plan, and it's what the market's doing right now. So we really just try to help our clients stay within what the market's doing, so that they can profit during the good market times. Okay, so optional notices, if you want to get those out there. So the first, if you want to just put them both on there, I think there's 2 of them, Kevin. There we go, perfect. The first notice, if you're keeping the tenants, you're going to keep the current tenants. You don't want to deal with, vacating anybody. You don't spend more money. Let's say you don't want to do the 90-day notice to renovate. You don't want to put $100,000 into your apartment complex to get up to market rate. That's totally fine. It doesn't fit within you profiting. It doesn't fit within your business plan. You're keeping the tenants. But with SB 608, that is the rent control, you can increase rents annually. And they put a percentage cap on it, which in my opinion, it's in favor for all of us. They say that it's to control rent and that you can't raise it a certain amount, but raising rent 10% is really quite a bit to anybody in this market. I mean, we're talking about $2,500 rents, $3,000 rents. I mean, 9.9%. I can't imagine getting a hit like that on my mortgage. $2,500 mortgage, you're getting a $500 increase. That's quite a big increase. So in my opinion, SB 608, there's no downfall to being able to raise rents 10%. Obviously the only thing is if you're inheriting a unit that's $700 a month, you're only able to raise it $70 a year. That's going to take you quite a bit of time. But also people that were never raising their rents are now just going by as 9.9%. And, they're thinking that that's nice and good. That's the lower rate and whatnot. But so that's what's kind of going on with that. But in my opinion, if the rents have not been raised in 1 year, the first thing I would do when I inherit those tenants is give them a notice to increase rents. You have to give a 90-day notice if they've been there over a year. If you're inheriting a tenant that's been in there less than a year, well, you can't raise rents within 1 year more than once. So there isn't an option for that. But so when you're raising rents, it's 90 days notice to raise rent to the tenant. So I would do that across the board. Once you get your new property in place, is just go ahead and see when the last time they were raised, get those notices in place that you can start hopefully getting those rents up to market rate, because a lot of times the property is not. So the way that they come up with that percentage rate is 7% plus the West Coast Consumer Price Index. So for 2022, it's 9.9%. And then also you could, as the new owner, not from the seller, do a 90-day notice when you're getting your feet wet, learning the property. It's been about 30 days since you've owned it. And you're like, you know what, I think I do want to do maybe one of those renovation notices. And that's basically all you have, because nobody's moving in, and maybe a family member might move in, but the renovation notice is kind of key if you're wanting to vacate somebody, and also try to get it back up to market rate.
Question popped up, Michelle, from the previous slide. It had to do with the number of 4. Does 4 units in a building count as 4 properties?
I am not sure.
Okay.
4 units.
Would it follow a deed?
I would imagine that those units are part of one property.
Okay.
So I would assume that it goes up by address, property address. So I don't know. Maybe if you have like 3 condos inside of somewhere, but I would imagine that each individual address is considered one of the 4. Oh, here we are. I thought we'd give us quite a few bits for questions and answers, and just kind of maybe what you're going through, or if you have a house or whatnot. I did put the websites here for the resources. If you guys want to go ahead and use that. And again, I will send it out with PDF with all of the slide shows on there. But
a couple of questions already coming in. One is a lot of people are questioning about this 4 unit or 4 property thing. Do all 4 doors have to be in Oregon for the rule? Well, that's the first part of the question.
What we've run across, because we've had the same kind of thing, it's gray. There is no black and white on it. There's nothing in the SB 608 that says in Oregon, in here, in there. There isn't, unless I've made some changes to it. But yeah, I don't really have any clarification on that. I'm sorry.
And then if the seller's out of state, or if the seller has out of state rentals, would those count as for the 4? So basically, I think your answer would be the same.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think at this point, we're open to Q&A. If anyone has any additional questions they'd like to ask Michelle while she's here. Also, while I'm waiting for questions to come in, actually we got one. Someone just made the comment that they think it is by doors. So a fourplex equals 4 units. That's their opinion. Another question though is, can you also send us the SB 608 and Form 5A as part of your slide? So if you can give that to me, we can send that out to the agents as part of the presentation.
Form 5A, you can purchase it on Oregon Rental Housing. The one that I would include today is going to be a sample with some blackout on it, but
Okay.
I would get a copy of it. And then the SB 608, yeah, it's actually in one of these resources too, but I will send that resource link with the information as well.
Awesome, appreciate that. And there's some other comments here. Other people are agreeing that each door counts as a unit. So
okay.
Sounds like some people have had some experience in that arena.
Yeah.
So any other questions coming in from the queue while we're waiting for those? We do have just a quick poll. We wanted to ask the group while we have you. So while we have a little bit of time here, I'm going to launch a quick poll. We're asking information, feedback from everyone that's on the class on whether or not Zoom classes is the wave of the future, or if you'd like to see in-person classes return. So I'm launching the first poll, which is just asking, would you prefer CE in person or on Zoom? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. So if you guys could all answer that, and then if you have questions, feel free to go ahead and type those questions while we're waiting for everyone to kind of give their answers to that. So any other questions for Michelle? We'll get everyone a chance. I'm monitoring the Q&A. You can use the chat feature. If you want, you can even use the raise your hand, and you can actually, I can unmute you, ask you to unmute, and then we can let you ask the question to Michelle directly. So if you have any questions at all, looks like we've got most of the answers in on the poll. I'm going to go ahead and end that. Your answers are, it's kind of interesting, but about 90% of you would prefer just to keep it as is. So that's great feedback. I appreciate it. We do have a question in the queue. Let me pull that up. If I get it to pull up. If the property is under management, can the property manager deliver notices, or does the seller need to deliver the notice?
If the seller has a contract with an agent, then the agent can deliver.
Okay. And then we are given a 90-day notice to a tenant. We do have 7 apartments. When is the relocation check required?
You know, I don't have that in front of me, but there is, I believe it might go with the 120-day sale notice. I can look that up real quick because I'd love to clarify that for you guys.
And that's for Mike Prescott. So Mike, we'll circle back to you as soon as she finds the answer for that. We've got a couple other questions coming in. We can wait on those if you want while you look that one up, and then we'll come to those next questions. While she's looking that up, again, I have one more poll. I think I already know the answer to it. But we just want to, if I can get it to pull up here. We just want to know, if we did in-person classes, would you attend? And so I'll go ahead and let everyone answer that poll while she's looking up the answer to that other question. So if you guys don't mind answering that. Appreciate the feedback. And it is somewhat consistent with our earlier poll. Give everyone just another second. Have you found the answer to that, Michelle?
I've got SB open right now.
Okay.
I'm almost.
I'll go ahead and, okay, I think we got most of the answers here. I'm going to end the poll and share that. It is somewhat consistent with our previous poll. Only about 10% would absolutely attend. 66 still would likely attend. So It looks like you would still want to come to the class, but your preference would definitely be, and almost a quarter of you would not attend if it was in person. So I think we have our answer there. We'll continue with Zoom classes. So I appreciate the feedback on that. With the lift of COVID, we weren't sure if everyone was anxious to get back into having classes in person. I do find the Zoom classes a lot easier to do. So I think we'll probably just continue with that. And we'll give Michelle another second here to find her answer. Did you find it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so it says that the law requires that the landlord provide the relocation assistance at the time the termination notice is given. At that point in time, the seller is still the landlord. So as soon as you give the 90-day or the notice with the sales contract,
that's when the check's required.
Sending the check, yeah. So they actually get it before they vacate.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Mike. Another question is, when do you sell your property and turn over the tenants to the new owner? Do you need to include addendums with the lease, or can you withhold the addendums?
Yeah, as far as like a lease, like if I'm hearing you right, like even if we get a new tenant and we inherit a new lease, that lease still is in full effect, even if it's a new manager managing it. You can always sign a new lease with, all of your addendums and things like that, or you can add an addendum to it. That shouldn't be a problem. I'm not sure if I answered that correctly though.
I don't have a name associated with the question, so I'm sure the person who asked it knows. If that didn't answer, go ahead and do a follow-up question on that. Another question is, if a current tenant adds another person to live in the unit, does that reset the 1-year clock? Is that considered a new contract?
Yeah, it would have to be the entire unit. So if somebody's been in there over a year, then
it doesn't reset anything by adding an additional tenant.
No, I mean, if a tenant's added, most likely they're getting added to a previous lease.
Okay.
Whatever that lease is. So the start date of that lease.
Okay. And then if a tenant's lease is month to month, does the 90-day notice to terminate apply after they have been a tenant over 1 year?
Yes.
Okay.
90 days.
So it does terminate.
Yeah, they still have to do
notice.
it.
Right.
No, it's yep.
Yep. Okay. Let's see if we have any others. Any other questions? That cleared the queue. I was checking the chat. And we do have a couple in the chat. Let's see, relocation. Relocation is only due if the tenants are leaving though, correct?
Right, if you're doing a 90-day notice.
And then when is the best time to give relocation money? Is it at the time of notice? I think you answered that in that.
Right, time and notice.
Yep. Okay. And I think we've answered most of the questions then. Go back through the chat here. I'm not sure if I asked this one. If an owner decides to occupy the property for a month-to-month tenancy, and they've been there over a year, when does the 90-day notice timeline begin? Is it when the terms are accepted by both parties?
Okay, will you read the first part of that question again?
Yeah, if an owner decides to occupy the property for a month-to-month tenancy, and they've been there over a year, when does the 90-day notice timeline begin?
When you serve it. So whenever you're handing them that the seller's agreement and the 90-day notice, I mean, it all starts when you serve it.
And since the owner is going to occupy the property, they can do that just at any time they make that decision.
Are you talking about after a sale?
It's hard to understand. I'm not sure.
Yeah. No matter what, if the owner is moving in, let's say right after closing, they've given a 90-day notice during closing, or if they want to move in 6 months down the line after they've purchased it, it's the same process. An owner is moving in. It's a 90-day notice if you're over a year.
Okay, and then one more, does the clock on the, people type in the chat, it bumps around. Does the clock on the tenant occupancy start over when ownership changes? For example, if the tenant is over a year and the property sells, does that start the clock over?
No, their occupancy remains, like the start of their occupancy.
Occupancy is grandfathered then. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have one other question. Is the relocation amount equal to 1 month's rent?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm trying to see if we have any other questions on that. We do have a few more minutes if people have those. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and conclude a little early. I don't see any other questions popping up. So Michelle, I want to thank you for this. This was very informative. I really appreciate for you taking time out of your busy schedule with everything you have going on to talk to these agents and to help us present this information. So really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
With that, everyone, we'll go ahead and conclude and we will have your certificates out within no later than Tuesday, hopefully even before. Actually, now we're getting a couple Q&As popping in right at the end here. Oh, nope, they're just saying thank you. So again, we'll have your certificates. That's usually the #1 question is when will you get them? You'll have them no later than Tuesday in your email. If you don't get them by the end of the day on Tuesday in your email, please feel free to reach out to us. It means there was probably a glitch and somehow it didn't get to you. So definitely feel free to follow up with us to get that certificate, but we'll have them to you soon. With that, thank you again for everything. And we will, when we send the certificates, include a copy of her slides to you and include that as part of the attachment when we send your certificate. Someone just asked if we could make sure we do that. So with that, thank you all. Have a great great rest of your day and great rest of the week. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Okay.